Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. So today we are talking about my top 10 favorite movies of 2022. I can't believe we're already at that point again. The year has just absolutely flown by. I'm going to give you guys some honorable mentions as well. But before we get into the video, real quick, if you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. So that way you get notifications for all my new videos. And if you guys can, give this video a thumbs up. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about some of my favorite movies of this past year. And real quick guys, before we get into the video, I feel like I just have to give this disclaimer. This is my personal list. These are my personal favorite movies of 2022. I can almost guarantee that our lists are probably going to be different. And hey, that's completely fine. I mean, there's no way that my lists are going to be the exact same as everyone out there. I totally understand that. There's some films that I didn't get a chance to see. And so I want you guys to share your list with me as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about these movies. All right, so starting things off with my honorable mentions, and it was super tough to make this list. Honestly, at one point I was thinking about doing a top 15 because that would have just made things a lot easier for me. But I decided to make it a little bit more difficult on myself and only make a top 10. But there was a couple movies that I really enjoyed these films. And so I felt like they at least deserved an honorable mention. And some of you guys might even be surprised that they didn't make my top 10. So in no particular order, first we're going to start off with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So I am a huge Scarlet Witch, Elizabeth Olsen fan. So yes, I know this is supposed to be more a Doctor Strange movie. But because you could arguably almost say it was a Doctor Strange and a Scarlet Witch movie, so I was just really excited to see her on the big screen, get some more action with her, and getting to see her play almost a villain role this time around. I was loving that. I know some people were upset about that, and then having Sam Raimi direct it, giving it that horror feel to it, was one of my favorites of the year for sure. Just didn't quite make the top 10. And then we have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Just saw this movie not too long ago. I was really kind of nervous going into this movie just because everything that I had to deal with. Obviously, it was made during the pandemic, but losing the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, that greatly affected the film. And what Ryan Coogler was able to do with this movie, I absolutely loved this film. It's definitely one of my favorite projects coming out of Phase 4. And again, just didn't quite make that top 10, but something that I can't wait to watch again. We also have Terrifier 2. It was so close to making my top 10. This was one of my favorite theater experiences of this year. Seeing this movie with a big group of people was definitely something. Not that I'm going to forget anytime soon. Man, just some of the scenes that happened in this movie are definitely going to be talked about for a long time. I really enjoyed this. I just got my steelbook for the film. I got the 4K that's coming in as well, so I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I love this franchise, just where it was kind of this independent Indiegogo funded project or crowdfunded project, and getting it to see where it is at now as a big horror fan. I just think that's really cool, and I'm really happy for everyone that's involved with the cast with these movies. So, and I can't wait for Terrifier 3. Another film that's going to make my honorable mentions list is Prey. Man, this was unexpected. I did not think a prequel to the Predator franchise was going to make my list, but I loved this movie, and I was so disappointed that it did not get a theatrical release because after seeing it, I really feel like it should have. Amber Midthunder playing the lead character here, I thought she was just fascinating to watch. I loved getting to see her go about her day-to-day activities even before we kind of get to the Predator aspect of the film. But yeah, I thought this was a great entry to the franchise and one of my favorite movies of the year for sure. Alright, these couple ones I feel like I'm probably going to piss some people off that they didn't make the top 10. We have Smile. Smile is one of those movies for a horror film that I wasn't really going to see, if I'm being honest, because I think when I saw the first trailer, it kind of gave me the vibes of Truth and Dare, a movie that we got a couple years ago, and I was not a fan of that movie at all. And so I saw that and I was like, to me, the trailer had a generic feel to it. And man, I couldn't have been more wrong. I decided to see it after hearing some good word of mouth. And I love this movie. I know I've seen some people saying that it sucks or it's too much like The Grudge or It Follows, movies like that. But I don't know. For me, it really worked. I thought it was creepy as hell and one of my favorite horror movies of the year. Then we also have The Menu. Again, so close to making my top 10. Great performances from everyone involved in this cast. I love that going into the movie, I was expecting kind of one thing to happen, and it ended up going a completely different direction. So I thought that the way that they handled that, that's always a nice surprise when you think that, you know, one certain thing's going to happen and they kind of flip it on its head. Anya Taylor-Joy is in the film. Great performances from everyone around. I love the satire on the food industry. And yeah, I can't wait to pick this movie up when it comes out on Blu-ray and 4K. And then finally, we have Scream. It killed me not putting this in my top 10. I was really going back and forth with a couple of these movies because Scream was one of the first movies that came out in the beginning of the year. I am a huge Scream franchise fan, so getting to see another Scream film back on the big screen, I was really excited for that. Had Jenna Ortega in it, and you know, we got a couple of the original cast members as well. I was really curious what they're going to do, where obviously we don't have Wes Craven anymore, you know, unfortunately, rest in peace. And, you know, considering that, what they were able to do with this movie, it was kind of the Force Awakens, I feel like, of the Scream franchise, you know, kind of soft rebooting things, getting everyone back into the mix. And I had an absolute blast with this thing. I saw it a couple times in theaters myself, and I picked it up and I watched it on 4K already. So one of my favorite movies of the year, just didn't quite make that top 10. All right, guys, those are my honorable mentions for the year. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and talk about my top 10 favorite movies of the year, starting off with number 10, and that is Barbarian. So I really knew nothing about this movie going into it, and I think for me and a lot of other people, that made the experience that much better, because Barbarian starts off as one thing and you think that's where the film's going to go, and then it kind of just takes these different twists and turns, and it kind of goes batshit crazy at one point, and I absolutely love that. It made for one of my most fun experiences in the theaters, and you have great performances by Georgina Campbell, Bill Skarsgård, and Justin Long in the movie too. So one of my favorite horror movies of the year for sure. At number 9, we have The Batman. If you told me back in the days when the Twilight films were coming out that Sparkly Boy was going to be Batman in the future, I just would have laughed, and yet here we are. I love that this was a year 2 Batman, and I think this might be my favorite portrayal of Gotham as a whole. It almost felt like its own character, and I'm just really excited to see where they are going to take this particular Batman franchise in the future. At number 8, we have The Fallout. This is a movie that I don't know if a lot of people are going to have on their list because it came out really, really early in the year, and I want to say, if I remember correctly, I know I watched it on streaming personally, but I believe it was a straight-to video-on-demand release. It didn't have a theatrical release. The film stars Jenna Ortega and Maddie Ziegler, who play a couple of high school students that their lives are turned upside down after a tragedy hits their school, which happens way too often nowadays. And it just follows them and how they deal with that, their reaction to those events throughout the rest of the film, how their lives are just affected by that. And I'm going to give you guys a heads up. It might be triggering for some people for sure, so just a warning going into it. It's not an easy watch at all. But man, this movie just really, really got me in the feels. I was tearing up a couple times for sure. And again, another film where, you know, Jenna Ortega was in there. So she has had a fantastic year. At number 7, we have Puss and Boots, The Last Wish. This is a good example of why I always wait to do my top 10 favorite movies of the year until almost the last minute, because it never fails. There's always a film like this that I end up seeing very late, right when I'm about to do my list, that I'm like, shit, this is going to make my top 10 of the year. And I never expected this movie to make my top 10 because I had not seen the original film and really had no intention to see this at all either. But man, as a film fan, I absolutely love when that happens, that you go into a movie not really expecting much, or you didn't, you know, had no intention of watching it, and it ends up becoming like one of your favorite movies of the year. That's always a blast. This movie just had, the animation was absolutely gorgeous, and I loved all the characters in this movie, so it's definitely my favorite animated film of 2022 and why it made my list. At number 6, we have The Fable Men. So The Fable Men is the semi-autobiographical story of Steven Spielberg, but it's also a story of a boy who falls in love with the magic of movies and making them as well. And being a fan of Steven Spielberg and just a fan of the creation of movies, the art of movie making, this movie just really connected with me on a personal level as well. Then at number 5, we have X. So X was directed by Ty West and stars Jenna Ortega, Brittany Snow, and Mia Goth, and others. I know some people felt this movie was a little boring or a little too weird, but I freaking love this movie. From early on, the creepy Texas Chainsaw-ish vibe that I got from the movie that really carried throughout. I don't know if it was just that 70s setting or taking place on a farm. That's the kind of vibe that I got through the movie, and it just made me feel uneasy throughout the whole film. And also the aspect of the characters, so they were making a porno movie basically, but I loved the fact that it was also just about making a movie and trying to break into the industry. So I like that aspect to the story of it as well. So just one of my favorite horror movies of 2022 easily. But at number 4, we have Pearl. So Pearl is the Technicolor prequel to X, where we find out the background story to Pearl, once again played by Mia Goth, who I think honestly gave the performance of the year as far as the horror genre goes. Just blew my mind with some of the scenes that she had in this film. I fucking love this movie. Between this and X, I had no idea that we were getting 2 movies back to back from the same director in the same year. But man, if once Maxine comes out, if it's as good as these 2 other films, for me personally, it's easily going to be one of my favorite horror trilogies by far. At number 3, we have The Northmen. Every time that Robert Eggers puts out a new film, for me personally, it's always going to be a must-watch. I absolutely adore The Witch. Probably one of my favorite horror movies in the last 15 to 20 years. I love that movie. I know some people, it kind of divides some people, but for me, I loved it. That's where I first discovered Anya Taylor-Joy as an actor, the first film that I saw her in. The Lighthouse, I wasn't quite as big of a fan of, for sure. I think that movie was a little too weird for me, but it was an experience for sure. And just the level of detail that Robert Eggers puts into each one of his movies, someone who loves the art of filmmaking, I really appreciate that, so I'm definitely going to always check out his movies. And this time around, he ends up returning with an epic Viking revenge tale with great performances from Anya Taylor-Joy, Alexander Skarsgård, and more. Definitely check this one out. And at number 2, we have Top Gun Maverick. Oftentimes, when we have a sequel to a movie where there's been a large gap in between films, it usually doesn't turn out very well, but this movie is the exception for sure. The difference with this movie is you can tell that this project, there was a lot of heart and passion that went into the making of this movie. And man, some of the aerial scenes that we got in this film were absolutely breathtaking. This was one of my favorite theater experience of the year for sure, because I saw it in IMAX, full packed house, and something that I won't forget at all. And finally, at number 1, and I know some people are probably going to give me shit about this because it's the cool thing to hate this movie, but again, I'm going to tell you guys that if you didn't watch my review for this movie that I put up just recently, I actually didn't even see the original film when it came out. I just saw the first movie literally a couple weeks ago on my screen, my TV. So I didn't even see it in theaters. So I by no means am I this huge fan of this franchise, but my number 1 favorite movie of the year is going to be Avatar: The Way of Water. This was easily my favorite theater experience of 2022. This movie reminded me of why I fell in love with the magic of movies in the first place. Just having that sense of wonder and awe, looking up at the big screen and just going back to Pandora, all these amazing visuals, especially when we got to the underwater aspects of the film. The first time watching it, I've seen it a couple times now, the first time watching it and just sitting there, just at a loss of words of what I was seeing as far as what James Cameron was able to accomplish as far as the technology with just, the filming of underwater and things like that. Feeling like I was there, that I could almost touch the rain that was coming out with the 3D. It just made me feel like a little kid at the movies again, man. And like I said, I know some people are probably like, oh, you're just drinking the Kool-Aid. That's just the popular thing to say. And hey, sure, the story is not this Shakespearean type of, of plot or anything like that, but it was just an amazing time at the movies. I loved, going back to Pandora and seeing this on the big screen. My favorite theater experience of the year, easily. And what can I say? I fucking loved it, man. So that's going to wrap up my top 10 favorite movies of 2022. I personally, for me, I thought this was a great year for movies. I'm really curious to see what your guys' favorite movies are, so feel free to list those down in the comments. You can throw in some honorable mentions in there as well. One of my favorite things about doing these type of lists is that there's always going to be some movies in there that, like I said, maybe I didn't get a chance to check out or I hadn't heard of for whatever reason. So a lot of times when I see these different lists, I'll take those movies that I didn't see or get a chance to, and I'll go watch them afterwards. So I definitely want to hear what your guys' personal lists are down below in the comments. So let me know. And again, if you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. Give this video a thumbs up and keep an eye out. I got a lot of things coming in 2023. I'm really excited to share with you guys. So again, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that way you can see all that new stuff that I got coming. And as always, guys, please make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.